In today's episode of Cryptic Surgery, I'm going to be breaking down the top 5 most devious clues I've encountered over the past 2 weeks. We're going to be looking at The Independent, The Guardian, Financial Times, The Observer, and Private Eye. Let's get started. And we're starting off with this monster clue, really set by The Independent. Typically, these crosswords are going to be that mid to hard range, so quite a good challenge. But you don't know if you're going to have a good or a bad day. And I think when I saw this clue, it was probably going to be a bad day, and I certainly had to ask around a bit to help pass this clue. Now, part of approaching this clue was, trying to guess the definition or at least the answer before then passing the rest of the clue. So almost reverse engineering. Not always a good way to do it, but when you've got a breakdown here of 14, and I haven't even read out the clue yet. That's how intimidating it is. 14 down, it was 325, so a phrase. Millions enthralled by new poem on Woodhouse, English name adopted by author. And so you're looking at the 3, 2, and 5, and you're thinking, okay, is there a phrase here that is probably going to be towards the end of the clue as a definition? Because you've got millions enthralled by, which might tell us that there's something around about millions that's going to be enthralled by, or at least contained by, new poem on Woodhouse. So, that would tell us that there's a bit of wordplay going on at the start here, and at the end of the clue is going to be the definition. And so, name adopted by author or English name adopted by author, you can think of what that phrase might be, but let's break it down because there's a lot of wordplay indicators here. I nearly ran out of colors for highlighting each of these pieces. First of all, and I'll do a few at a time, you've got millions, which is abbreviated to just the letter M. Uh, that letter is enthralled by, contained by, new poem. And so what's going on here? You've got new, that's abbreviated to the letter N, and then you've got poem, and then you've got to think of another word for poem, like a charade or another synonym of poem, not a charade, sorry. And another word for poem is ode, and so you've got Node, and the letter M is enthralled by those letters. And so you can probably then guess, once you've got this first bit, what the overall answer is going to be here. But then this was the tricky part for passing, that you've got Woodhouse and then English. And so here's the answer. I should say, maybe I've given it away there a little bit. Name adopted by author, nom de plume, right? Which is like a pen name an author would give themselves, or nom de plume. And how do we get plum, especially? Because the letter E, you can see it, you abbreviate the letter E there, and that comes in at the end here. But with Woodhouse, now you've got to have a bit of cultural knowledge about this. So P.G. Woodhouse was, a 20th century English writer. Where do you get plum from? Well, P.G. I think is Pelham Grenville, I think. And how Woodhouse pronounced his first name when he was younger was like Pelham Plum, so Plum, so it became almost like an affectionate nickname that Woodhouse then had. And so that's the reference to plum there. And so all together, you've got you've got you got a couple of abbreviations, you've got some synonyms going on here, you've got a container amongst all of this. So a very tricky clue to pass, but here is the answer. Second up, then, is this clue set by Kite in The Guardian. 12A or 12 across, Nancy's in the centre again for 6. Now, the fun piece with kite crossword clues is that they're often thematic. So as you're putting them together, you can often uh, derive a couple of answers based on an overall theme or topic that the crossword is going to be based on. Now, and in this case, because obviously I'm taking these clues out of their context of the crossword, this is a difficult clue to just get by itself. You'll want to be, probably trying to solve a couple of other clues and seeing are there, other letters that you can place in this in the six here, and then derive from that what this clue is trying to mean. So uh, when we're addressing this clue, there's a couple of misdirects here. So we're saying Nancy's in the center again. Now, the interesting piece here is when completing this particular clue, we're not thinking actually of Nancy like a person's name. In fact, we're actually referring to a French city, Nancy. And when we've got Nancy in, this is the tricky bit. It's telling us then to take the French word for in, or at least a reference to the word in French, and that is going to be the part of the clue that we insert. And so Nancy, I think, is a northeastern city in France. And if you translate the word in, you can get a few different things, but typically in a cryptic crossword, there's going to be a couple of, one or two letter combinations that in French or in German or Spanish. And you'll see just as a preview for the next one coming on, there's going to be a Spanish iteration of this. Um, you can sort of figure it out just from pattern recognition, not actually having to know French. So in this case, it's, and I don't really speak French, en, I think is what we're saying here. But really, when we're reading this, it's going to be N or EN. That comes from non-C's in, so how you say in non-C. And then you've got the center. And here, the is just a connector word. There's no real meaning behind it. But with center, the capital letter is a bit of a misdirect, often with punctuation. It doesn't necessarily mean anything significant. And so, center here, we're just filling in another word for center. That's four letters, which then, if we've got non C's in, again is going to be the definition. And so, can you really think then of a six-letter word that starts with en? And you can for encore. And so, core, center, right? Synonyms there. And then we have the answer all together there. Third here, then we've got from the Financial Times this clue set by Zamorka, 15 across. Key European agreement about time off allowed for four letters. Now, Financial Times crosswords, again, they're moderately challenging. They're not all the way to most difficult, but often they can be quite accessible. This particular clue, and maybe it's just my bias, that when there is like a language component here where you have to substitute in a word from another language, I f- I find those to be quite devious, quite tricky. So we saw that with that second clue, and here, in fact, we've got something similar going on. This one I think is even harder because it doesn't really give us a sense of what language we should be thinking about. At least with the previous clue, once you clue in non-C, you can say, okay, that's in France, so we've got the language. Here we've got key European agreement, and that's going to be about time off allowed. And the reason why we can think here that the definition is going to be at the start of this clue is because we've got time off allowed. Now, time is often abbreviated to just the letter T. And so we're looks like we're saying here is that the letter T is going to come off allowed. But of course, allowed doesn't have a letter T in it. So we've got to think of a synonym for allowed and then delete the T off it. And that's going to form a component of this clue. And I think that's where I started here. And so time off allowed, a synonym for allowed with a T in it is let. You let something happen, if you allow something to happen. So you delete the T, you have LE. And that means that key is going to be probably the definition. And you can think key here, not key as in most important, or even key like an instrument you use to unlock something, but rather key as in a geographical sense, an isle. And so that's where I ended up getting the IS for European agreement, uh, because European agreement, then you got ISLE, but it's about. And so a two-letter word for European agreement. So really, we're trying to find, you're going to go through all the different languages and go, right, is there, what kind of agreement are we talking about? And in this case, it is because we got ISLE, you can see that, and because about is a reversal indicator, it's C. So the Spanish yes is really what European agreement is referring to, and we've turned that around. And so really you can get this answer I'll before understanding the European agreement about, and often, as in this case, you get the definition and the solution, and then you're just trying to reverse engineer. Well, how does that fit? What does that tell us anything about the way the rest of about the rest of the clue is set up? So there is our answer. Fourth on our list, then, from the Observer, we have this clue here set by Himelo, who's taken over from Azid. I could never. I read it more than I said it, as a setter, and I found that the first few crosswords set with Himelo have been very challenging. So definitely much more on the more difficult end of the spectrum there. And this one in particular, like maybe the theme here again is about language, because I've got another one here about language, but I found this clue to be quite vague. In fact, in terms of trying to just work out, you know, there's almost examples by or definitions by examples where it's not a direct synonym of a word choice here. It's instead an example of this broader category. And we got that here in this clue, where we've got lover of language cheers for 8. And so the tricky thing here is you got language and you go, well, which one? Right? Not a direct synonym perhaps of language, but it's the example that it's trying to come out of it. And so again, with some of these, I was going, well, it's probably going to either be lover or cheers. Are there synonyms for these words that are 8 letters long, and then you trying to pass that way? Because otherwise, it's tricky. It's quite vague how we might come up with these. Now, this is how tricky it was. You're thinking language, okay, is it? And you've only got 8 letters as well, and you've got to factor in some other pieces. So are there any languages that are quite, short in their spelling, or there's abbreviations? Well, the language under consideration here is Edo. I think I pronounced that right. Just check my notes. Edo. And you're going, Edo? Is that what country is that? Well, it's not actually from anything. It's and I had to make some notes here because I've seen it in passing, but I hadn't gone into the history. And then, of course, you end up going down the Wikipedia rabbit hole with some of this. It's an international auxiliary language, which means that it's an initiative which is still actually present today. They have yearly conferences. I saw last year they had a conference in Madrid, for instance. It's a language initiative to create a universal language to improve communication across different cultures, different references, and so on. And Edo, especially, founded in 1907, so well over 100 years now, this language has been around. And it was it was actually a spin off originally from another language, Esperanto. And Esperanto was formulated in the late 1800s, again with that initiative of how do you can you converse in a more straightforward sense across borders, across different languages. And interestingly, Edo means offspring in Esperanto. Right? So it's got those roots there. And so back to the clue, language. Edo, okay, language is there, one language, a universal language. Maybe that could be defensible. But then you've got a couple of letters left here, 5 letters. Now, because we've got language and that's coming in at the start, cheers is probably going to be the last five letters, but we've cheers isn't really going to work for us here. Edo cheer, Ido cheer, not a word. So is there a synonym for cheers that we can put in here for 5 letters to produce a whole word that could probably mean lover? Well, if you say cheers, a few different connotations behind it, of course, but if you're saying cheers like goodbye, later, right? Later is the synonym here that fits in. And then you've got idolater, who is a lover, someone who's besotted with somebody else. And that is our definition here. Our last clue of the day then coming from Private Eye and set by Cyclops. Uh, 3 down, double lavatory fitted on car. Enjoy for 9 letters. Now, of course, if you're doing a Private Eye crossword, Private Eye is, of course, a satirical magazine, and often the clues and the answers rely on topical knowledge of something that's happened in the week, or a general understanding of the political environment. Lots of innuendos as well, lots of risque satirical references. So it's a particular kind of cryptic crossword here that Cyclops produces. And if you saw my long form video last week, I did a full solve of this crossword number 811. So please go and check that out afterwards if you want to see a whole crossword solve for Private Eye. And I actually took this clue from that because when I was solving that crossword, I found this clue to be quite difficult to pass and to complete. I think it was actually one of the last clues I was able to solve in that crossword. And the reason why it was difficult is because of this word here, car. Again, a general vague concept really for are we looking for a synonym of car like vehicle, or a type of car, an example of a car? And in this case, the example is so specific. I couldn't get it until I'd filled in a couple of other letters around this clue. And so, how are we breaking this clue down? Well, for the first piece is double could be a mislead or a misdirect, because if you're doubling something, you might take a word, shorten it, and then just double it. That is replicate it. And so in this case, lavatory could mean loo, and it's Lulu if you're doubling it. And that was one direction I went in, but then you look at the rest of the clue and you go, okay, Lulu, you've then only got 3 letters left. How do you work that out for car, enjoy? Enjoy would have to be the definition in that case, probably. Is there a 9 letter word for enjoy that is Lulu something? It was a difficult road to go down. So we pulled it back and we said, well, maybe it's just Lou. And because this is a down clue, it's fitted on. So that is, it's fitted on at the top of this down clue, fitted on top of, and then you've got car enjoy. And so in this sense, we're saying, okay, we know double is probably the definition. Is so then we're trying to fill out the rest of this word, trying to get towards another word meaning double. This was the tricky one for car there. And you're thinking, what is a synonym or an example? Well, this is how niche it was. Ka, the Ford Ka, which I think is even discontinued now. So it's not even a car that you'll see on the roads much anymore, or at least, no newer models. And so I thought this was probably too difficult, I think. It is only really when I got the full word, you're going car, and then you're going the forward car. I don't know. So for me, that was um, a bit. I don't know if unfair is the right word, but you know, tricky. And then you can probably fill in the rest of the word from here to mean double. A double or a look-alike, and a synonym for enjoy is to like. And so that completes our clue here for double. And so there we have it for today's episode. Thank you for watching to this point. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Morning Cryptic, the main purpose of this channel is actually to provide daily beginner cryptic crossword challenges to help people get involved in doing some of these crossword puzzles. So if you're interested in just getting started or are interested in a daily challenge, please do join our community. Thank you so much.